It is said that the more we hold on to a thing, the less we have it, the less opportunity or less chance there is that we can keep it. It is only in loosing a thing and letting it go that we really have it. Now, we see instances of that in human experience all the time. There are these jealous men and women, jealous of each other, and the more they watch each other and hold on and try to keep them separate from the rest of the world, the quicker they lose them, the more quickly they fall away from them. And so it is very often with people who are grasping with money. Very often they lose it, whereas the other fellow who's freer with it finds it circulates more freely to him as well as from him. In every walk of life we can see illustrations of where holding on sometimes defeats our purpose. Now, so it is, as you're going to find from now on, that the more you try to demonstrate supply, the less you will have of it. And the more you try to demonstrate health, the less you will have of it. Now, the reason for that is this: there is no supply and there is no health in and of themselves. Both health and supply are qualities and activities of God. And so the only way to get health and to get supply is to get God. And then you'll find that health and supply are included in the God. Therefore, let loose right now of all attempts to get health and supply, or companionship, or home, or opportunity. Let loose of it. Stop trying to demonstrate anything or anybody. Release it, loose it, and let it go. And center your whole attention on the seeking of the realization of God. Now, I can illustrate that to you in this way. Many of you right here in this room have asked me for help. And it may help you to know in what way I give you help. In some cases, of course, when I receive your letter, I know the name and I know who you are. But in other cases, I receive a letter with a name on it, and although I may have met you and you've been in class and we know each other, yet I can't recall you or connect you up with a face. So I really don't know who you are more than Miss Jones or Mr. Brown. But it doesn't concern me one way or another whether I do remember who you are or I do not, because the help I give has nothing to do even with whether I know you or ever heard of you. The help is given in this way. And it makes no difference. One of you has written for physical healing and the other one has written for help for a child. Another one has written for some sense of supply or lack. Another one has written for some phase of family discord. And the way the help is given is this. I sit here and I immediately drop you. After I've read your letter, you do not enter my thought. My attention now is turned to God, the realm within me. Somewhere within my consciousness, there is an activity we call God or the Christ. Somewhere within my consciousness, there is that which Jesus called the Father within me that doeth the works. Somewhere within me is that Christ of which Paul spoke. I can do all things through Christ. Now I know as well as you do, I know even better than you do, that I of my own self can do nothing. I know much better than anyone in this room that Joel in and of himself can do nothing for you. Might give you some human advice which may be good or may be bad, could give you an opinion. But so far as help to you is concerned, there is nothing that Joel knows that will ever help you, because all the wisdom that's written in all the books is of no help when you want spiritual help. What counts is a Christ presence or a Christ power or a Christ influence. And that has nothing to do with what we know of truth. Not a thing. It's something that you could have and still not know one single word of truth. There's only one reason that half of the message of the infinite way concerns the letter of truth, and that is so as to separate you from old theological beliefs, outworn superstitions, and to remove from you the possibility of a blind faith. That is why we have the letter of truth. But once you have that, don't believe for a minute that that has anything to do with healing power, or that it has anything to do with meeting your need, physical, mental, moral, or financial basis, because it hasn't one single thing to do with it. Not all the truth that is written in books, not all the truth that's written in the Infinite Way books will heal a simple headache. Now then, what will? A realization of the Christ, a feeling of God's presence, an awareness of an infinite invisible. And so your letter comes now, and believe me, I do not think of any statements that are in my writings or any statements that are in the Bible, for the simple reason that I know that no matter what I can remember or think up or invent, it isn't going to be the thing that helps you. And so I get quiet. Now you haven't turned to me for Joel, you've turned to me for God. And if I can't give you God, you can't get help. And so I sit here. I know, Father, that thy grace is the sufficiency unto this experience. I know that nothing but the grace of God will meet this need. I don't have to voice it always in these words. May be voiced in some different words next time. But the idea that I'm trying to convey to you is that I'm sitting here quietly realizing that I can of my own self do nothing. It has to be God's grace. It has to be an activity or presence of the Christ. And I'm trained so that my ear is opened. I don't expect to hear any words. It interests me very little whether I hear any words or see any visions. I'm not interested in that. And yet, I cannot bar out the possibility of hearing words or seeing visions. But whether or not this comes that way, no interest to me. One thing alone interests me: to wait. And then within me comes either a feeling of peace, a feeling of release, a feeling that the Father is on the scene, or sometimes a specific statement of truth. It may be from Scripture, it may be from my writings, it may be some remembered passage from Mrs. Eddy's writings. Because I have a storehouse of Mrs. Eddy's writings in my memory, and there's no reason why one of those gems shouldn't pop out. Some of you have gems from the Unity writings. There's no reason why whatever of truth is in those books shouldn't come to your remembrance. Now, then comes this experience that enables me to answer your letter. I pick up my dictaphone and begin to dictate. Last week I had a letter, and I had just gotten to dear friend, and then I said, I was just about to dictate a letter to you, but it's no use now. I got the feeling that all is well. Let me hear from you. And that was all that went out in that letter. At other times it comes to me to put in some passage of, now why not rest and relax and let this work take over? Or, now stop thinking about this problem for a minute so that God can come into the scene. But whatever it is that I'm led to put in that letter, I do. And it may be just 1 or 2 sentences. But some of you know that it can also be 5 or 10 pages, all depending what the occasion requires at that moment, and I'm not the judge. Now, you may be expecting 1 or 2 pages from me, and you get awfully shocked when you get 1 sentence. Or you may say in there, you don't have to answer this, and then find that you get a whole page back, because I am not answering to suit what you expect. I'm not catering to anything that you want of me or do not want of me. You have reached out to the Christ, and I am going to present that Christ to you in whatever form it comes. And as you know, sometimes the help comes to you long before you can get my letter, so there's no need of me giving you a long letter and expecting you to get healed by reading it, when I'm expecting you to be healed before it reaches you. Now, you have asked for this help, and I have to answer that letter. Or if you were there in person, I would have to answer you in person. And as you know, who have come to me for personal interviews, you know that after you've had a minute or 2 to tell your troubles, and you haven't got enough troubles to take more than a couple of minutes telling about, you'll notice that I say, now let us meditate, or let's be quiet. And that is because I've recognized through 25 years that Joel doesn't enter this picture anymore. Now, if Christ isn't available, there is no help for you. And so we'll wait. It's as if internally I'm just a whole state of listening, of attention, of alertness. Since the kingdom of God is within me, the answer will come from within me. Some people have tried to find out whether it comes from the region of the heart, or the region of the head, or the region of the stomach. I don't know anything about where it comes from. I know that it comes, and I'm able either to say, oh well, that's that, God is on the field, or to write something or say something specific. But whether or not I say anything or write anything is of no importance. The important thing is that the activity of the Christ has been realized, and you're going to have your freedom. Sometimes you can block it by sitting around waiting to get an answer to your letter or your cable. And that could be a very bad thing. I had an experience recently from up here of a cable coming for help. And my first temptation was to answer it with a cable and to say that I'm on the field, but I couldn't do it. And every time I came to think of it, I couldn't even write an answer. I just had to abide and wait and wait and wait for this thing to unfold. And then when it unfolded, I said, well, it's foolish to do anything about it now. It's too late. And it turned out to be too late, too. The healing had taken place. So anything I would have said would have been foolishness then. Now, very often that happens, that I receive mail, and you get an answer back before you even know that I have it. But then there are other times when I get that, and it has to stay on my desk for a day or 2 or 3, because every time I turn to it, I feel a barrier. I feel that it just hasn't broken through. Now, there's no use of my sitting down to entertain you with all I know, when there's lots of books you can get to find out what I know. You see that? All that counts is, can I present to you the activity of the Christ? Now, when you are called upon for help, it is possible that occasionally you will give a word of cheer, of comfort, of guidance, and sometimes a good big message. But don't believe that that's going to do anything more than outwardly satisfy your patient or student, because that's all it's going to do. And if you expect more of it than that, you expect too much. It is when the click comes in there, When that realization of the Christ comes, that is when the healing takes place. This is Lindsay. Talk to this girl. If she rubbed out last night's program, we're going to tell the judge. Now, you see, we come back to the statement, God is. Or we come back to the statement, Christ is a reality. But the world is at war. It hates each other. If you could have made this trip with me last year, you would have come home believing that you were living back in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th century. You would have been aware that this world today is in the greatest hatred that's ever been known on the face of the earth at any time. We call this the age of spirit, and it is. But don't think that out in the human world they have felt it yet. There are more intense hatreds and more widespread hatreds in the world today than in any particular year or age of history so far known. I'll illustrate that for you. When the Holy Lands were broken up, and half was given to the Hebrews and the other half was given to the Arabs, it was just as if somebody came into your house and took half of your property away from you to give it to your enemy. What right have they got to do this to me? So the Hebrews, who look upon the Holy Lands as their particular land because they've occupied it since long before the days of Jesus, they felt that one half of their heart's blood was being taken from them. But the Arabs also have lived there for 1,000 or 1,500 years, and so the Arabs look on it as their land. And when half of it was taken away, they also felt that their homeland was being invaded. And so an intense hatred was set up, first of all, between the Hebrews and the Arabs. A hatred so intense that, figuratively speaking, you could say they could drink each other's blood. Yes, but that wasn't the only hatred. The hatred also came up toward England and the United States for having been responsible for that division. And so more hatreds are engendered. But now, as you cross the Mediterranean, you will find that 600,000 Arabs who were thrown out of the Holy Lands and who have since, by natural processes, become 900,000, are living in concentration camps supported by the United Nations exquisitely on $1.25 per week per person for housing, food, clothing, recreation, and health. $1.25 per week per person. Do you know the hatreds that exist among those 900,000 displaced Arabs and their friends and relatives? Yes, but when you go further, India has been divided too. And part of it is now Pakistan and part of it is India. And those who lived in Pakistan who were Hindus have been thrown out of the country. And those who lived in India who were of the Pakistan faith, they have been kicked out of India into Pakistan, and there are concentration camps on both sides filled with millions of people being supported by the United Nations at $1.25 per week per person. But when you keep on traveling, every country you go into is filled with concentration camps of such poverty as you can't even imagine, such filth, such lack of clothing, such, well, complete lack of education, even for the children, that underneath the hatreds are festering more than can be realized. And when you come across to China, the communists can't get into Hong Kong, and the Hong Kong citizens can't get into China, and there are more concentration camps. Now, these hatreds that are in the world act underneath to bring about the headlines that you have in the newspapers and the radios. And yet, we have just said God is, and Christ is a reality, a vital reality in human experience. How do you match that up with those conditions? And you say, we can't figure that out. Well, don't be that way. That's what these three men said in this article in Coronet magazine. They can't figure it out. Don't be that way. You can figure it out in the light of this teaching. Christ is a reality if so be the Spirit of God dwell in you. Christ is a reality if you dwell in the secret place of the Most High. Christ is a reality if you love your neighbor as yourself. Now, when you ask for help, I could say to you, God is, or Christ is, from now till doomsday. But you wouldn't receive any help from that. You just get another false promise that you've been listening to for centuries. But if I can close my eyes to whatever picture you are presenting to me, open my consciousness, listen for the still small voice. Be still and know that I am in the midst of you. Go back to the Master's declaration that the kingdom of God is within me. And then wait. Then the Christ comes into active manifestation, into actual experience, and that Christ that then becomes alive in my consciousness becomes the law of harmony unto your experience. And if I can't realize Christ, there is no spiritual law acting in your experience. On the other hand, you can sit down in your family life and say, oh, God governs my home. You can go out and buy some signs and hang them up on the wall. God governs this home. And you can have the battle of the century there. And you can read the Bible every day too, and still have battles there. Because until Christ comes into the heart and soul, Christ isn't there. Until God becomes an actual realized state of being, God might just as well not be there so far as any effect is concerned. But when you sit down in your home and realize, yes, this home is the temple of God, and God is in this home, God does dwell in this home. God is the life and the soul of every individual in this home. God is the maintenance and the support of this home. And you reminded yourself of that, and then sit there and wait for confirmation. Remember, your having stated these things doesn't make it so. You've merely stated them to bring them to your conscious remembrance. But that hasn't done a thing except prepare you for the next experience. The next experience is to say, now, Father, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. Then into your consciousness will gently, peacefully, peaceably come a feeling of God's presence, a feeling of the Christ Spirit, something that tells you, ah, yes, I can feel it around my shoulders, or I can feel the warmth permeating my body. Something will let you know I am on the field. Now your household is God protected, God maintained, and God sustained. You can say to your child, be careful when you walk across the street, look out for the automobiles, but a child's attention is distracted with just a little toy, a little doll, a little top, a little dog running by, and their mind is no longer on the automobiles coming down the street. And then you say afterward, but I told you to be careful. Oh, that isn't enough. You did not fulfill your function as a parent. That wasn't enough, because you weren't taking into consideration that you were asking more of the child than it could fulfill. You were giving it too much responsibility. But as you sit down, and you may first have to consciously remember this, my child is not my child, it's the child of God. My child is God's responsibility. My child can go no place where the presence and spirit and power of God is not. If my child goes to hell, my child will find God. If my child walks through the valley of the shadow of death, my child will find God right at hand. I release my child into the bosom of the Father. But that's the preliminaries. That hasn't done the work yet. Now comes the work. Be still. Wait until that inner assurance comes, that feeling of God's presence, that activity of the Christ, and then send your child out anywhere he wants to go. Because it now is not a matter of what your child can do, it's a matter of what God is doing in the very center of your child. Realized God, concrete God, the visible manifestation and expression of God that now has been realized at the center. So it is with all of these hatreds in the world and all of these people. Christ is available to them, but not while they sit around just reciting prayers and reading books. That doesn't make Christ available to them. They could all rise out of their concentration camps. They could all arouse in the consciousness of the United Nations officials a sense of responsibility for them. Instead of, as some officials have said, why, just let them die out gradually because there's no work for them to do anyhow. We can't fit them into society anymore, so they'll just die out. That's the human answer to it. But there is a Christ answer to it, but it isn't going to appear until in their consciousness is introduced not a story about Christ, but an activity of Christ working in and through them. Now, well, I have pointed this out to our students here before. The New Thought movement has decreased about 90% in the last 30 years. Yet here and there is a center that flourishes. Why? Is it because it's Seattle? No, I've known some to go right out of existence in Seattle, right while others were growing. Is it because it's Portland? No. One was flourishing in Portland and another one was going downhill. No, it has nothing to do with place. It has to do with an activity of Christ first in the consciousness of the leader, whoever it may be. If it isn't there, the center can't flourish. If it is there, the center can flourish. But after the leader comes that little group who may constitute the inner circle. It might be a board of directors, or it might be a board of teachers or Sunday school teachers. If the Christ can't be made to come active and alive in them, even the leader has a hard time to keep the whole works going. As a matter of fact, it's too hard for any one person to be responsible for an activity where others are concerned. That is why in our work I can be responsible for the activity of the infinite way insofar as it affects headquarters and books and tapes and so forth, because it only takes the activity of Christ in one consciousness to govern that. But the activity of Christ in me will not make an infinite way teacher in New York or Chicago or Cincinnati or Seattle successful. It won't do it. It has to be the activity of Christ in their consciousness. Otherwise, somebody says, "Why, that infinite way group never grows." Do you see that? I can't have it. That's your, and so it is with your home. The activity of Christ in my consciousness will meet your need while you're looking to me, but it won't meet the need of your home. You have to have the activity of Christ in you to meet that need in your home or your business. No. God is and Christ is, but don't depend on that. Because God is and Christ is since before Abraham, and the world has had a lot of trouble. Now the answer, the solution to all problems is the realized Christ. Let us call it the risen Christ. Now Christ buried in the tomb of your mind will not come forth and do wonders. But Christ risen in your consciousness. Christ raised up from the tomb. Christ felt. That is the miracle worker of the ages. It will begin with you as a person and improve your health and your supply and your home and your surroundings. Then as you permit that Christ to be active in your consciousness on behalf of those who are receptive to you, it will begin to be an influence in their experience. And eventually it will circle the globe, because it will go from one to another and one to another until it has touched a dozen individuals in every city, and then 2 dozen, and 6 dozen, and 12 dozen. But it has to begin with one, just as it began of old with one Buddha, one Lao Tse, one Jesus Christ, one John, one George Fox, one Jacob Fame, one William Law, one Mary Baker Eddy. One, always one. It has to begin in the consciousness of one. And God is no respecter of persons. That could just as well be you, that one. That could just as well be me. It all depends on the degree, first of all, of our knowing the correct letter of truth, which teaches us that where I am, God is. Where God is, I am, and all that God is, I am. And then enables us to sit down and actually come into the realization of it until it then takes over. Then Scripture is fulfilled. And you can say, oh, the presence goes before me to make the crooked places straight. What presence are you talking about? One you read about in a book? No, it won't work. Too many people are in this world going to church and hearing that God is good and then going home and waiting for something to happen when it won't. It will happen only as Christ becomes a realized, risen activity within your consciousness. Then the activity of truth can pour out of your mouth as a message, but it can pour out of your home as happiness, or it can pour out of your business as success. But it must be a realized Christ, a risen Christ. It must be a Christ felt in consciousness. It must touch you. It must warm you. It must illumine you. In other words, there must be an it, and a realized it, and a felt it. Then you can rest. Then you can rest. But not for too long, because the mesmerism of the world comes in and 6 hours later fills you up with what the headlines were or what the radio news was, and you begin to slip. You begin to let the Christ slip from you. And so you learn to sit down 6 hours later and renew yourself. Fill yourself again with a realization of this presence of this Christ. And 6 hours again, you do it again. But the day comes when it becomes a matter of every hour. And from that point, it goes on to become unnecessary at all. Because at that stage, it takes over and lives your life, and there's no more conscious effort necessary. But at this stage of development, there is a conscious effort necessary to achieve that mind that was in Christ Jesus, to achieve the realization of the presence of the Christ. And the conscious effort means your hours of meditation and contemplation. It is in your hours of meditation or contemplation that you open yourself for the Christ to slip in between the lines. And then words become unnecessary, thoughts become unnecessary. If anything, thoughts come to you from the within. God's word is spoken to you, uttered within you, and now you're not voicing them, you're hearing them. And then when you give them out, you're merely repeating that which you have heard with your inner ear. And now, this is the secret of harmonious living. First of all, know the correct letter of truth so that you know that there is no such thing as a mystery why evil exists. So that you know there is no such thing as having to suffer sin, disease, death for any reason whatsoever. There is no law binding you to any form of discord. But the absence of the conscious realization of this spiritual presence and power will be that sense of separation from God that perpetuates our discord. On the other hand, the realization of this inner, infinite, invisible is what sends itself out into expression. Browning, truth is within ourselves. We must open out a way for the imprisoned splendor to escape. Will you always remember that whatever it is you're seeking is already embodied within you? And to have any thought of it coming to you from a person or a condition or a circumstance is your error. Whatever it is you're seeking is already within your own being, and you have to make a way for it to escape from you. The person who is looking for companionship and overlooking the fact that companionship is a quality of their own being which they are called upon to express is forgetting the whole secret of life. You cannot find anything out here. You have to express it from within your own being. And that's why this week's work is this. Don't try to get help. You won't succeed. You'll keep it 6 inches away from you all the time. You'll just be on the verge of getting it, but you won't quite catch up with it. Don't try to demonstrate supply. You can't do it. It's just that far ahead of you that you'll never catch up to it. But seek the realization of God, and you'll find health and supply and home and companionship all embodied in that. You cannot have God and a lack. Somewhere it has been written that if you had God and this whole world, you would have nothing more than if you just had God. And that's true, because God constitutes the world. God embraces the world. God includes the world within itself. And having God, you have the world. But seeking the world separate and apart from God is fatal. It can't be done spiritually. Can't be done. There's only one demonstration for us to make. That demonstration is the realized Christ. Then, whether our need of the moment is mental, moral, physical, or financial, it will be seemingly added unto us. Actually, it will be disclosed as part of our very being. But it will appear outwardly as if it were being added unto us, as if it were coming from somewhere external to us. You'd be surprised the person whose soul is filled with the love of God finds love flowing to them in infinite forms from people, through people. And the person whose consciousness is not filled with the love of God usually finds a coldness in the world, an emptiness, a barrenness in the world, and wonders why people don't love them or do loving things for them. How can they, when the love they're expecting isn't in other people, it's in themselves? The love we get from another is the love that's in ourselves, but it isn't personal. It's God. So if we haven't a consciousness of God, don't expect good. Not from anybody or through anybody. Certainly not as a permanent thing. Don't confuse this love of God with human affection. I don't mean by that if you love your child that means you have love in your heart. It might mean you have a lot of selfishness in your heart. You can sometimes judge how much love in your heart you have by how much love you have for other people's children. That would be a better indication of how much love you have than what you're doing for your own. In the same way, we're apt to judge how much we love by what we do for our friends and relatives. The Master saw that loving your friends and relatives will profit you nothing. You have to love your enemies. Pray for your enemies. And so it is. It isn't how much human love we have for our church or our leader. That isn't what determines anything. How much love have we for God expressed as children, expressed as our fellow man? How much love have we for truth? How can we know whether or not our love for God is sincere? How can we gauge the depth of our affection for God? Why, it's just as scientific as running an airplane or an automobile. How much time and attention are you willing to give to sit down in the silence until you feel God's presence? That determines how much love for God you have. If you haven't the time, if you haven't the patience, if you haven't the interest to give your whole heart and soul and mind to the realization of this presence of Christ, you haven't any love for it. It's in the same way as if you had a mother living in China, and you say, how much do I love my mother? I don't know. How hard are you willing to struggle, and how much are you willing to sacrifice to get the money to get over to visit her or send her the money for her comfort? That will determine how much love you have. We have the same measuring stick. God is a reality. Christ is a living entity. You don't feel it? You never have felt it? No, all right. Now how much are you willing to sacrifice? Of time, effort, reading, study, books, whatever it is that can arouse that sleeping, invisible Christ. Because that determines how much love you have for it. One thing is certain, you are not going to find the harmony that you long for until you do have the experience of the risen Christ. Oh yes, you may find a teacher or practitioner who can bring to you a temporary sense of health or supply or good or peace or happiness, what the world calls a demonstration, or even 10 of them. But that's not your ultimate good. Your ultimate good is when your good is flowing as naturally as the rivers flow to the sea. And that can't come about by hiring a practitioner or a teacher. No, if that were possible, then all the rich people would have health and wealth and happiness, because they could hire the best practitioners and the best teachers. Isn't that ridiculous to stop and think that rich people could do that? Well, they can't do it at all. It isn't any more available to the rich than it is to the poor. No, no, no. We could only be a help to the wealthiest of people. Not in proportion to how much they could pay us, but in proportion to what degree of receptivity they had toward the message, toward the Christ. And the person with money or without has that same access to the Christ. Come without money and without price, and you'll find that it is available. Now, nothing of God is reserved for special people, whether they're rich people or God's chosen people or somebody else. No. No, God is available in proportion as grace opens us to the love of God. Now, it isn't health we're seeking, and it isn't comfort, and it isn't harmony, and it isn't peace. All those things we are through with this week. We do not want peace, not peace of mind or peace of soul or peace of body. We don't want world peace. We don't want health. We don't want opportunity. One thing have I desired, that I might know thee. That's all. One thing, my heart cries out. God, open yourself to me. Reveal yourself to me. I don't care whether you reveal yourself to me in health or wealth or poverty or sickness. Reveal thyself to me, and then all things will come. Peace of mind, peace of body, peace of soul. Even peace on earth and goodwill among men cannot come while we're seeking it. Can't come while we're seeking it. It will only come when we stop seeking it. I can assure you that security and safety will never come to you while you seek it. Never. Security and safety only comes when you have given up the desire for security and safety and have learned to desire a realization of the presence of God. In that realization, in that feeling of God's presence, there is security, there is safety, there is peace, there is joy. We have here a group of people in this room, and I suppose humanly it might be the natural thing to desire that there be peace among us, or understanding among us, or prosperity among us. I never have such feelings. Never have had. I've never even had the temptation to have such feelings. Only one thing that I desire before I come into a room, or a center, or an audience, or a class, and that's a feeling of God's presence. We have this meditation before our meetings for one purpose, only for the realization of the activity of the Christ in the consciousness of everyone here, and that we be united in that Christ. That's all. Nobody comes to this chair to ask for your health, or your supply, or your peace, or your understanding. They come to this chair for only one purpose, to ask for the realization of God and our unitedness in God. That's all. If we have that, we will have everything else that's necessary for the harmony of our being. I am working at this very present moment on two very interesting matters concerning capital and unions. And I can assure you that there's only one work that I'm doing, and that is almost every hour retiring to a corner to realize the activity of Christ in my consciousness, which is the activity of Christ in the consciousness of everyone who has turned to my consciousness. That's all. I don't seek understanding between capital and labor. I don't seek a settlement of problems. I seek only that Christ be realized. That's all. Christ be realized. And my effectiveness in that work is determined by whether or not I get the answer or feeling of Christ within me. Because if I get it within me, they will feel it. Whoever sits in this chair and has a realization of Christ has that realization as much for you as for themselves, without thinking of you, without trying to send out their thoughts and impose any Christ on you. They don't try to do that. They know too much. They sit here and realize Christ. But because there is only one soul in this room, one mind, one spirit, that realized Christ is felt by all. And so if you have a problem and it concerns a group of people, don't try to influence their thinking. Don't try to send out good thoughts to them. Forget them. Just sit down and realize Christ. then all those who have attuned themselves to you will get the response. And the one who has attuned themselves to you for health will get health, and the one who has done it for supply will get supply, and the one who's done it for companionship will get companionship. Why? Because Christ doesn't send these things. Christ is these things. Christ does not send meat to one and wine to one and water to another. Christ coming is the wine and the meat and the water and the bread. Is that clear? There are no such things as many demonstrations. There is only one demonstration, the realization of the Christ. Then when meat time comes, meat comes. When milk time comes, milk comes. When wine time comes, wine comes. But it isn't true. It's that in every case Christ is realized as omnipresent. That's all we need. Whether you use the word God or whether you use the word Christ, whether you use the word spirit, whether you use the word soul, it all means the same thing, the realization of an infinite invisible. And when you have that, that infinite invisible appears externally as transportation, if that's what's needed, or any other form of good. Do you follow that? Now watch. We have had a very interesting experience here, and we have taken a step which, followed up for the next year, will change the entire history of your life and of the lives of many who touch you. Now that doesn't mean it'll change all your relatives and friends, because there may be many of those who will not be receptive or responsive to this state of consciousness. But remember this, that we can leave mother, brother, sister, and father, so that all those who are receptive become our sisters, mothers, brothers, and fathers in place of what were blood relatives. Everyone who has entered this work has, at least for a time, lost their blood relatives and their close friends. They can't help that because they've seen a vision that the others can't catch up with. But usually later on, when your life has shown forth the rightness of what you have done, then these people come back, and then you have them all again. It happens over and over again. And a few who do not come back are replaced by others, because who is my mother, brother, sister, father? You. You, my disciples. You who are attuned. Now, do not say to those who come to you that they must not be concerned for their health or their wealth or their companionship, because you will defeat your own purpose. But you, when you are working for them, you realize, I'm not interested in health, wealth, opportunity. I'm interested in the realization of the risen Christ. For when I feel that, they will have their health and their supply and all those things that are necessary for them. Now this is a high step we've taken, and I do hope that you will avail yourselves of every opportunity there is to study the Chicago and this Seattle series that resulted this trip, because it is a complete whole. I came over here to the mainland. My trip is 10,000 miles by air just to record these 6 tapes. And they couldn't be recorded any other place than where they have been recorded, because it wasn't a human will that sent me to Chicago or Seattle, because human will might have picked a half a dozen other cities. But it was direction that brought me here. And it was direction that said, do no public work. Draw around you those who can receive and respond to this new message and begin to leave behind the old ways. Not that the old ways were wrong. Don't ever let anyone say that the infinite way says anybody's way is wrong. Every step we have taken has been necessary for our unfoldment, But also never let anyone say that we have come to the end of demonstration. Don't let anyone say that we've come to the end of God's understanding. We'll never reach there. And just as we are taking this step today in a higher mode and means of spiritual unfoldment than has yet been presented, does not rule out the fact that there will be others that may even be higher. Let us have no limit on God's capacity to reveal itself, because that's what this is. This, at this minute, is our capacity to bring through God's capacity to reveal itself. God's capacity is infinite. We are conditioning that capacity in our receptivity, and it's conditioned by our present degree of receptivity. But who is it to say that if we become more receptive through this, that tomorrow someone won't come through with a higher degree of receptivity to bring forth an even greater measure of God's capacity to reveal itself? Do you see that? There is no limit. The last word has never been said on spiritual living until the day when the world stands up and says, "Know ye not? I am God." After that, there'll be no more unfoldment. There we are.